Hello, can you hear me?
There you go.
Yes,
Ready?
can you hear us?
Can you hear
Ashley?
me?
Yes, ma'am, can you hear us?
Yep.
Okay, very good.
Okay, we'll start the meeting. We'll start out with introductions. Rick Rasmussen.
Dean Cluse, Lynn Lukes.
Courtney Morris, Drainage Administrator.
Harold Trask.
Alan Kleinbile, engineer.
Bob Rasmussen, District 5 Humboldt.
Mike Carpenter.
Dennis Thompson, Bill Ristow.
Scott Hippen.
Okay, thanks everybody for coming.
Ashley's gonna introduce herself.
Sorry,
Ashley Bosch, Wright County.
sorry, Ashley.
It's all right.
Okay. We need to present the initial findings and preliminary engineer's report.
Yeah, so thanks everybody for coming. Again, I'm Colin Klingbeil, the engineer with Jacobson Westergaard that's working on this project. The handouts are there, I think everybody's got them, but we're gonna kind of go through those. The bigger one is the full engineer's report, and then the one pager is basically kind of an tentative agenda for this meeting. It's not really, it's not a formal hearing for sure, so this is just an informational meeting. So there's no action that can come out of this. That would take place at a separate date, but basically, I put together this information, but I always like to be able to have a meeting like this. It's a lot of information to throw at landowners and to expect that we can throw this at you and then have one meeting and then make a big decision on that all in that same day is kind of a lot. So at least like to try to give an opportunity for a meeting like this. And also, I'm not saying that this report is perfect and final and will not be changed. And so I feel like the best projects are a combination of stuff that I know, and then also the landowners. I mean, you have a lot more experience with the land. You maybe been living on it, farming it for decades. And so there's information that you would probably have that I wouldn't be aware of. That would be helpful in coming up with the best project. So yeah, that I'll kind of go through the report, and then, like I said, it doesn't want to be a formal thing, so have kind of an open discussion. If there's questions, I'm not gonna go through it all. If you have questions in the middle of it, that's fine. We can just have a conversation. So how did this thing get started? Well, a petition was filed. So this is a drainage district, and it's a joint drainage district. It has lands in both Wright counties. And so the trustees for the drainage district are both the Wright County and Humboldt County boards of supervisors. And so with the process that got started with a petition, the petition was asking for improvements to drainage within this drainage district. It was established over 100 years ago. And the original tile system was put in 1917. And really no improvements have been done since that time. And what we commonly find is that the standards that they used in 1970, it was a completely different time, completely different world. They didn't even fathom probably that someday we were going to be putting in plastic, plowing it in just all over the field. It was more or less, they've got some wet holes that they're going to run a few random tiles there, and maybe they can pasture it or hope to get a crop off it, every once in a while. So, and it also was a lot harder to install those things. They were often digging it in by hand. They didn't have excavators and things that we have available today. So for both of those reasons, they tended to put in smaller mains than what we would be typically seeing put in today for today's drainage needs. So I guess with that, the process of this, like I said, a petition was filed. We're having an informational meeting, got a preliminary report. So the idea is we have a conversation today. Kind of the outcomes I would like to see is if there's any input from landowners that if I need to make any changes to this before it's finalized, I guess for a formal hearing and decision, I can do that. The other thing we'll talk about a little bit later is what I call preliminary classification. And so in this report, I've got recommendations for what to do, and it's a big dollar figure. But being there's multiple landowners in the drainage district, you may ask, well, what does that mean for me as far as cost on my property? And so the drainage district has an assessment schedule, but it's the same one that's been in place for 100 years. And so it really isn't going to be helpful to figure out how this project is going to be paid for. If improvements are done, reclassification to figure out a fair way to assess the cost of it will have to be done. And so before a decision gets made, I'm getting long-winded here, but basically a pre-class is getting a preliminary idea of what the parcel by parcel cost would be for the project. To give the landowners a better idea what their cost would be and help decide whether or not you maybe want to support the project or not. I can give dollar per acre averages, but average is average, and probably nobody's gonna be right at the average. Some will be above and some below. So I guess with that,
I have a question about that. If you
Yeah.
do the preliminary classification, how much work is it to go back and do the actual classification? Are you gonna use LiDAR? And so essentially, it's a matter of getting the commissioners together and reviewing the work?
yeah,
Or is there more beyond that?
so the vast majority of the work would be done
Okay.
and would be reusable.
Okay.
So if, like for this drainage district, even if we don't do improvements, I'm gonna recommend that
Absolutely.
reclassification be done.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, a preliminary classification is not wasted by any
Right.
means, even if the project doesn't move forward.
Yep.
Cause that can be used, turn around and be used for the reclassification,
Right.
yeah. Good
And
point.
it's good for, I think, 10 years. If the project was delayed or something, I think that classification is good for 10 years before it would have to be redone.
I think that, I might be wrong on this, but I believe the 10-year thing is about a repair report. Or
Okay,
something
all
like
right.
that.
Okay,
So I don't think it has anything to do with reclass or
Okay.
improvement reports, but regardless, if there was a delay in something and then an engineer was to get hired again, if this is out there.
Right.
Why wouldn't they at
Absolutely.
least use this information to assist? And then they wouldn't have to at least start, from scratch.
Yeah.
And if it was me, I'd have everything there, and it wouldn't be much extra to get it going again. So about this drainage district, and this report, I'll point you to all the maps in the back. There's at least 4 of them. So the first of the 4 maps is probably where we should start. It's labeled the existing tile system map. So this shows, and this, by the way, in the meeting handout, I said it's northeast of Rutland. I got my R towns. Things up.
Renwick.
For some reason have a problem with, there's a lot of smaller towns that start with R in Palo Alto, in this area, and I get them mixed up in my head. So anyways, northeast of Renwick there, it straddles Highway 17. You can see there's a main tile that starts as a 22-inch and then it goes up to a 24 and then back down to a 22. And you might think that's a little bit strange, but basically with capacities, they were looking at the slope of the tile, and they figured that would work. I don't typically like to ever go down in size as you're going downhill, but that's what they did here. And then there's a lateral A that branches off to the west and crosses Highway 17. And then there's a lateral 1 and a lateral 1 spur. And so one thing, this is just short of 1,400 acres. And one thing you might notice is at the very northern extent of this drainage district, there's no district tile. So presumably there's tile in there, but whatever's in there is all private. And I know just looking at aerial photos and talking with some of you landowners that northern portion is a little bit on the wetter side, one of the problem areas. So let's see, that's about 13,000 feet of tile over. And it outlets into Prairie Creek there at the bottom end of that map. You can see it outlets into a creek, a natural creek, and not a an open drainage ditch. So the next map, I guess we might as well just go through these maps, is the existing drainage coefficient map. And so when we're looking at designing these systems, we're kind of back, there's an after the back, yep. The kind of the design criteria we use to look at is what's called the drainage coefficient. And basically it's the equivalent amount of water over that entire area that you can get rid of in a day. And so it's inches per day. As we were talking before, 100 years ago, they were kind of on the lower end of this, and it's not uncommon to see as low as 1/10 of an inch per day. Sometimes it's a lot of times maybe 1/8 of an inch. About as high as I've seen for 100-year-old systems is a quarter inch per day. And so in today's world, and really for the past several decades, we've been more or less at a minimum of 1/2 inch per day drainage coefficient for designs for improvements. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but you can see on this map kind of the drainage coefficients for this system for the area that it drains. So we're on the lower side of things. It gets down as low as 0.12 inches per day. At the lower end of the system, 0.14 to 0.17 inches per day. So pretty commonly what we see, but not really enough for today's standards. It's just a matter of, I think probably at this point, most people can understand more drainage would be better. It's just a matter of cost benefit. It's going to cost X amount of dollars. Is it worth that much? That's more kind of the conversation. So the next map, this is a unique one. In addition, the boundary that I had on the previous maps was, and as I said with this report, this is not necessarily defined or set in stone, especially at the very north end there's some water could go kind of multiple directions. And I don't know what private tiles out there, if any of you have tile maps for any of this that haven't provided them yet, I'd sure appreciate it. It would help figure some of this stuff out. But there's actually a significant amount of surface drainage into this drainage district from outside its boundary. So you can see on this map that there's DD 151 or Wright County, that pink, or I think that's pink or tan or something, shaded area. It's tiled through a little bit of a hill to the east to the Boone River. But actually, if there's any water running over the surface of the ground, it comes into joint 162-7. And then there's some area that appears also in joint, what's that district called? Joint 5-113. That, looks like the surface water would come in, but this goes the other direction. So that's I gave those drainage coefficients, but it was based on the tile drained area. And if you add all this, and not always are you going to have enough rain and stuff to have a bunch of surface water running in here, but you will. at times, and that places additional burden on the system. So,
So a question,
yeah,
how do you prevent the surface water coming into this district? Or you got to add them into the district, they're not gonna wanna be added, especially when you got a petition out to do this, but how do you stop that? Because that's a lot of the problem with this drainage district is a lot of the surface water comes down when we get heavy rains, and then you can't get it off.
well, one, I don't think we can stop it, and the reason why. is
You
because
can't,
it-
468 says you can't.
It's the natural drainage path for the water. And they just happen to put a tile through the hill to take the tile drainage the other way. But we definitely can't block it off, anything like that. As far as adding them into the district, that gets a little complicated. And I had some discussion on that in this report. The long story short is, I don't think that's probably a good idea to try to do it. And the law is kind of unclear on that. If you're gonna annex somebody, what it says is they have to have material benefit. What is that? Material being something that is less or more than negligible. So if it's just some small amount, and you can obviously say they're dumping water in here, but is that enough to say that they have a material benefit from what we're doing in this joint drainage district? And there's been several court cases where people have attempted to do annexations where it's been fought. And so there's quite a bit of case law on those, and I was gonna read off in particular one in a 2017 case in Worth County.
What page are you on?
And it's the third paragraph from the bottom of page 10. So here I'm kind of discussing that it has to be materially benefit from the facility to the district. And then it could be argued that joint 162-7 brought a better outlet closer to the land of DD 151 than joint 5-113. But this is what the court said in the other: when the topography of land would ensure surface waters drained off the landowner's property naturally, a landowner must receive some benefit other than an outlet for surface waters to have a material benefit. And so to me, if we tried to pursue that, which it would, you're right, it would be pretty controversial in my mind to try to add in 1,000 acres and they just shed surface water into here. It is a burden on this drainage district. I'm not discounting that. I just think we'd be barking up the wrong tree if we tried that. So basically my conclusion in this report was that we should not pursue that.
I got a question.
Yeah,
We're talking about the topography in this drainage district, and does natural drainage that's been there for eons follow the tile? Does it flow above the tile, as a lot of them do? There's drainage that comes across the land, and it's been there since the beginning of time. Then we put in tile, and we basically followed that drainage area and put up intakes. Who governs that? They're like, yeah, now you talk about damming it up or blocking it.
yeah.
You can't block it. That's what I've always been told.
That's correct.
All right, but if it is blocked, if somebody blocks it at the tile with the intent to let the drainage tile take it, which sometimes is 5 days down the road before it'll drain the tile or the water from above. So if that's a good idea, if you could dam it there, but it isn't feasible. It shouldn't be, because it's always been said that the water drains down through the drainage area as it done for eons. Okay, who governs that particular part of this facet? Who's that jurisdiction come under? who's gonna say that the water stays open or the water gets blocked off? If I wanna block off, I can block it off at the road where it comes onto my land or block it from the neighbor. But somebody's gonna stop me if I do that.
The neighbor is probably going to, come to you first of all, but then if he doesn't receive, the correct answer or relief from his issue, then he's probably gonna go to a township trustee. A lot of times they'll skip the township trustee and come straight to the drainage trustees.
And the county supervisors are the drainage trustees.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and if. So drainage districts do have more ability than private landowners to change, like. Right in DD 151, I mean, they put a tile through a little bit of a hill, they took it out of the natural drainage path. Cause it was it was better to go that way with the tile.
Yep.
And they have the ability to do that.
They had the outlet to the river and that's why they did it.
Right. They just didn't take the surface water, like they left the top of the ground the same as it always has been.
Yeah,
And this, I mean, in this drainage district, it looks like instead of going to, where is it, Prairie Creek? If they would have gone to the Boone River, you would think that that would be a better outlet, but the topography might not be. It might have been a better outlet into the Prairie Creek. Because Prairie Creek eventually, well, not too far south of there, I think it dumps into the Boone.
Right.
it does, but, and that's, I didn't know that was my question here. Does the topography of the land, was a tile put in, does it follow it pretty closer to where the natural drainage was?
Pretty
It
typical.
doesn't, south of there, I know it does, it follows it right to the letter. Wherever there was a pathway for water to go, there was tiles put in to catch it, and there was intakes, several intakes. And I imagine this does pretty much the same thing.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Typically, when they were put in that long ago, they would have been hand dug and so they would go around a knoll in a hill or whatever to, like what you're talking about, to follow that natural
That's right, yeah.
surface course.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but now if I was sitting up here where I was surface draining, what would entice me to wanna get into your expansion here? I mean, it's running surface, why would I wanna go, it looks to me like the people on the right hand side, will have to eat it, because up here, let's say this water was mine, up here, it would run surface. What do I have to gain?
Yeah, that's, I agree with you. I don't
I
think.
mean,
we
you
can-
gotta look at it dollars and cents and. If you're
Yeah,
sitting up there,
And that's why I'm pointing this out, that additional water is placing a burden on this system, and it
Yeah.
should be considered in what we maybe do for improvements wise. But I'm not recommending trying to add those acres in and have them help try to pay for the project. I don't think that would be successful.
Yeah, it's not gonna benefit them any.
But you probably are adding a size
Yeah,
to take that.
yes, we'll get to that, but yeah, I'm recommending, in all honesty, a higher drainage coefficient for the design than I would have without this being the case. So that, I mean, in that way, it's adding additional cost to this project. But I think we have to unfortunately accept the fact that water is coming this way, and we can't realistically annex them in and ask them to pay that additional cost.
Thank you.
Okay, so the last map is. Let's see, before I get to that, this is the last map here, 3/4 inch per day drainage coefficient, proposed tile improvements. That's kind of my first attempt at looking at what kind of improvements we could do within this drainage district. And I've got three different colors there. A base main improvement, which would be running, and all these would not take out the old tile or anything, it'd be running alongside of it. So we put in, starting with a 48 inch, and then drop into a 42 all the way to 130th Street. And then there's kind of a couple, I don't know if you wanna call them add-ons or options or. But I separated them out so you can see how much extra it cost to extend the main improvement to the northeast. Another couple thousand feet, and then also this proposed lateral B, the yellow one. Going another half-mile north and then crossing Highway 17 and stopping.
Why would you dump anything into the boon?
Yeah, you would think that it would be low there, but it's a pretty big hill, evidently, so. It's not really feasible to go that direction. Now, about anything's possible. But I had a situation in Palo Alto County, large improvement project that ended up getting approved, where they were. Just like this, they were right on the west side of the Des Moines River in that case. And people are like, why can't we take some of this to the Des Moines River? And you wouldn't know it just looking at an aerial photo, but they would have to go 40 feet deep. To do that. And we still could have cut off like the upper part of the district and ran it, but. And I was like, boy, people don't do that very often, so I would have to check with some people, what would that even cost? And it wasn't gonna be cost effective to do that.
I'm not very good with names of streets, but that Adams Avenue, that's what I call the cemetery road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fairly consistently very high compared to
It
where
is.
the 42-inch tile is.
That'll fill up that Prairie Creek pretty good. And it gets full anyway all the time, so.
So with this. Got 3/4 inch per day drainage coefficient. We'd already talked about, a lot of them are today at a minimum of a 1/2 inch per day drainage coefficient. What we typically see is between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch per day. Here, because of all that additional surface water area coming in, and then also something we haven't talked about, the outlet into Prairie Creek is, in my opinion, not completely desirable, because you can't get it low enough into that creek. I think there will be times when that creek is higher out of its banks where some water is gonna back up. Now, we do have enough grade that there'll be elevation to help push water out, but it's not free outlet always. So it will hold back, it'll slow water down some.
You gotta wait your turn.
Yep, and so. Two things, and that's the other thing, is then once the creek goes down, well, it'll still flow out. But just at a reduced rate, and then once the creek goes down some, you've got a bigger pipe to get that water out of there that much faster. So that was kind of my thought process on starting with a 3/4 inch per day drainage coefficient. I think. If you're gonna do a project like this, the last one was done over 100 years ago. The idea is, let's take care of this for the next 100+ years. So a 1/2 inch. If you're gonna do it, in my opinion,
We'll do it right.
you ought to do the 3/4. So then. You kind of get the idea of the lay of the land with that, but what about costs? So. It's some pretty large diameter pipe. That the base improvement. Getting the main up to 130th Street.
Just on page 7.
Yeah. 7, 8.
Yes. Yeah, got a detailed cost estimate there. If we did just the base, this is showing the base main tile improvement subtotal for construction, but that was broke out into construction costs for each of those chunks of tile, and then at the end of it, there's non-construction costs, so the engineering. And there is some annexation that we would be looking at, not that 700 acres, reclassification costs. Damages done during construction, so pretty typically a project like this, unless you're lucky, you're probably gonna have to figure on some crop being destroyed in the process of doing the project. And some interest, we'll talk about how funds of the drainage district work and everything, but. So there's construction and non-construction costs. The total, if we did all of it, that's on that map, estimate of $1.66 million. And so over, and take this with a grain of salt again, but it's in the average over that nearly 1,400 acres would be a little over 1,200 an acre. And then if any parcel has more than a $500 assessment, they can opt to pay in installment payments and not pay it all at once. And you could, depending on what the board would set, they set the interest rate and the number of years to pay. Typically for a large project like this, it would normally be up to 20 years. And so in this, you can see average cost per acre per year at 5% interest for 10 years or 20 years, so $156 per acre per year for 10 years, and $97 an acre per year for 20 years.
We're at 6%, aren't we?
Are you guys
Yeah.
different?
Where it's,
Okay.
so just to be clear, that 1.6 million includes everything on the last page? Or does it just go up to 130th Street?
No, it's everything on that last page.
Okay, so if you break it out and not go the whole way, then how do you figure that, or don't you have it figured?
I do have it, I don't have it maybe in stuff that you guys have, but I do have that figured, and if we just did that, just run the main from the outlet to 130th Street, 1.2 million.
How many?
1.3. So, and, I mean. you
So
can tell
basically,
that's-
it's 300,000 more, 360,000 more to go the whole way.
Yeah, that's a large chunk of the cost, because it's large diameter pipe, so it adds up pretty quick, and it's a long stretch of, 48, 42 inch
That helps.
tile, yep. And I will point out that the cost estimate is based on using reinforced concrete pipe. I can go into a lengthy discussion, but this report would probably give you an idea how much I've thought that the plastic versus concrete. I've got maybe a 2-page analysis of that whole thing. And basically, to me, if you're gonna spend the money, you just as well do reinforced concrete pipe. Recently, my biggest concern has been when you calculate flows in a pipe, you look at something called a roughness coefficient, Manning's N. And what the plastic pipe suppliers are telling people to use, I don't believe is the right number. There's studies that show that they're doing a lot of studies when it's not under load. And when you get it down in the trench and it's getting pressed down, it's pushing the corrugations in, actually making the inside wavy. And that's not allowing the amount of flow that they're advertising, in my opinion. And so when I look at doing plastic, typically I would be looking at upsizing the pipe size. So that takes out a lot of it. We got to use a lot of rock. There's a lot more that can go wrong with installation. But anyway, I'm happy to talk more about that if there's specific questions, but I don't wanna go on and on and on.
Is it a significant cost, or does it, in your talk about it, other than the change in the drainage, what you presume is the drainage coefficient? Is it significant dollars difference though in going plastic?
So if you did plastic, that's another part of it, is that it depends on how you install it. And I know there's a lot of, and I probably, if I was putting in a private main, I probably would use dual wall plastic, but it's different if you've got 1,400 acres draining through here, and then you're trying to get a minimum drainage coefficient and make sure it lasts for 100 years. But some people use a spoon and then just set it at the bottom and then put dirt on top. The pipe suppliers would say that's okay most of the time, but really you should be using rock at a very minimum. If you use a spoon, and you should only really be using a spoon if you've got really firm material in the bottom of the trench. If it's soupy or anything loose at all, you should be digging it out and putting rock underneath it.
Well, the size makes a tremendous difference.
And that too, yes. The smaller plastic tiles, they're stronger. The bigger ones are relying, almost the whole strength of the system is what you put around it.
Right.
And that's another thing, typically doing inspection to make sure, like, as the engineer, we would inspect this to make sure they're doing it right. With plastic, you practically have to be there all the time if you're gonna ensure that it's done right, and a lot can go wrong. I'm not saying nothing can go wrong with our concrete, it can, but less.
Half the price.
Well, and that's where I was getting to, it depends on how you install. So if you install it the right way, it's actually about the same, because you end up spending a bunch of money on rock. And the extra requirements for the install and the compaction and everything, where you don't have near as much of that with the reinforced concrete pipe.
And rock's expensive as well, right?
It is. So I guess if we're comparing apples to apples on installing it, the way that I think that it should be, it's about the same price. And if it's about the same price to me, I would go with reinforced concrete pipe every time. So, I'm not completely opposed to bidding plastic. One thought process to that is that there's not very many suppliers of the reinforced concrete pipe around. And if they know that that's the only product that would be considered on the project, I don't know if they're gonna sharpen their pencils as much as if you throw plastic in there and I go, oh, we better sharpen our pencils if we want this, because they might go with plastic. So I'm not completely opposed to having a bid alternate for plastic, but I would probably have the pipe sizes a size bigger because of that roughness thing, and then make sure it's installed correctly and see what the prices come in at.
I realize it's very difficult to tell, but say this moves forward, is your estimate on cost, is it 10 or 20% below what the bid's gonna come in, or 10 or 20% above what the bids come in? I realize it's very difficult to answer, but approximately on your engineering firm, when you put things out for bid, is it apt to come underneath of what you're estimating?
Well, like you said, I can make no guarantees. These are estimates. So we don't have bids in front of us from contractors. But the way that I typically look at this is I try to err on the high side with these estimates.
Okay.
If I was sitting in your chair, what would I want? I'd want to know,
Worst case scenario.
I don't want it to come back 25% higher. And well, I agreed to this thinking it was this, and now it's 25% higher. If I would have known that, I wouldn't have done it. But if I give you a high number and you say, okay, let's do this, and then it comes back 20% less, there's no problem with that. So that I do.
What are you gonna recommend? I mean, what's your interpretation? What are you gonna recommend that? Yeah,
As far as tile improvement?
yeah, I mean, when it's all said and done, you're gonna have a plan, and what's your plan?
Well, yeah. What I've got on this map, well, how do I say this? as far as drainage improvements, in my opinion, if you're gonna do it, you're paying me. And I know I've had this conversation many times with landowners. They're like, well, can we just do this small chunk? It's a lot of money, and then come back later and do this other chunk, and then do another chunk. The problem is, if you don't like paying guys like me, every time you want to do that, the law says you have to get a petition, hire an engineer, get a report, do all the meetings, ring up the bill.
Again,
And again, and so, and there is, going back to how it gets paid for, yes, there's interest if you pay for it over 20 years. But at least it sort of is like paying, you can pay for it over time instead of just having it all at once. It's almost equivalent to, let's do a chunk, and then late in 10 years, let's do a chunk. If that makes any sense. So I guess I'll say do as much as you can stomach. It's maybe the simple way of putting it. It's not my money, so I can't.
Pretty sides
So
on the final
yeah,
plan.
good, very good question. So with improvements, the first line of defense, or the first test is this thing called remonstrance. And so if landowners in the district write objections and say, I don't want this improvement, it doesn't have to be anything more specific than that. I object to this. There is you count up the number of objections and the number of acres they represent. And if more than half of the landowners involved object, who also own at least 70% or more of the lands involved, then it meets remonstrance and you cannot move forward. That's the first the check. And then if that's kind of a high bar. They set it up in the code that way because they kind of wanted to promote drainage, and so it's a high bar. If it doesn't meet that, then the trustees vote on it. And so the Wright County and Humboldt County boards of supervisors, acting jointly as the trustees for this drainage district, would put it to a vote on whether or not to proceed or how to proceed. So that's how the final decision was.
so if we vote yes and they vote yes, how's the farmer gonna feel it didn't wanna do it?
He's not gonna be happy.
Yeah.
I know
that.
That's all yeah,
That's part of drainage.
that's why it's written in the code the way that it is, so that, I mean, they do have the ability to do remonstrance, but, if they don't meet the criteria, then the project typically proceeds.
Yeah.
Now, I guess I've seen one case, in the south part of Wright County that was remonstrated against, and it did not proceed. But usually the landowners are for improving the drainage. That doesn't make, I mean, I'm not happy when I get a drainage bill, but I'm also not happy when I've got ponds sitting in my field, so. Drainage is a good thing, but an expensive thing, that's for sure.
And your price of materials is always changing.
Yeah.
I mean, if you do a certain amount of your work now and you put off another chunk of it for another time, that price from, what your estimate is now could be substantially higher when you decide that, yep, okay, we're ready to do the next chunk or however it might be.
You know, 100-year tile sounds like an awful little tile. Have you got any volume or any? Or picking your mind, make you say something you don't know for sure, but and you guesstimate, what are these farmers getting out of this? Are they getting 50% out of this setup the way it is, 40%? Or is it just so?
Compared to what they got now?
Yeah, what I'm saying is, I'm trying to sit in the owner's seat here. I'm just a supervisor, so I haven't got any money in the game, but the thing of it is, Because I was just wondering. What have they got? What kind of performance will you guess to me that they've got?
It would be more than, I mean, if you've got, on the average, maybe an eighth of an inch coefficient, maybe a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
And you're going, and you're keeping that, but you're adding 3/4 of an inch coefficient. So you're more than doubling the drainage ability, provided that the outlet,
Yeah.
provided it can get away. When it's all full, it's all full.
I think what you're trying to say, you wanna know a percentage of improvement that tile would make, the new tile would make.
Well, the guys are gonna spend $1,400 an acre roughly, I mean, $1,400 an acre, I mean, he wants to know what he's gaining out of it. I mean,
Sure, yeah.
I mean, what has he got? And this is what he's gonna have, you know, will his farm gain 50%?
Quite honestly,
Yield you're talking.
quite honestly, I think it makes a difference where you're at in the drainage district. Okay, and people near Prairie Creek are not gonna gain that much. The people on the top side are gonna gain a lot more. That's my opinion.
I see.
Depends on where you're at.
But if I understand correctly, what you're saying is that you wanna put in a main tile line 48 inches in diameter. Right next to the existing 22, 24 inch. But that during heavy rains, when we're actually trying to get it moving, that the tile line fills and we don't drain.
Sort of. I wouldn't say the tile won't drain. It's going to. It'll slow it down some. Obviously, when you look at the specifics, yeah, it's gonna be highly variable depending on a lot of conditions. How high is the water level in Prairie Creek? How much rain did we get? How short of a time? How wet was it before we got that rain? There's a lot of things at play there.
And that's gonna make a difference when you're talking Prairie Creek, let's say we stand your pools, that looks like Lake Huron. When you get a 3-inch rain, and the higher that goes, the less water is gonna come out of that. Because the more back pressure is gonna affect that.
Didn't you say the fall is 17 feet from the beginning to the end?
Yeah,
That's
for
a
the main,
huge amount of head pressure on it.
right. But, and then once it's pressurized, I mean, it's gonna slow everybody down some, but it has ability to push it out. So it's very difficult to try to summarize or generalize when you have infinite number of scenarios that could happen. But I can sympathize with that line of thinking, because if you're trying to decide, is it worth this amount of money? When the creek's up, it's gonna slow it down. Is it worth it? And I don't think I can't give a concrete cement answer on that. And everybody's situation is different too, so yeah, go ahead.
I was just looking at page 3, the pictures.
Yeah.
They're kind of instructive in a way. Were those taken on the same day, and what we're looking at there in the left-hand picture in the lower right corner is the existing tile line coming out there that's already half submerged.
Yes.
And so with that much water, of course, it's clearly fall. But we're sort of just sitting there doing nothing drainage wise or very little. Is that the
No,
way to
it's
think
still
of
draining.
it? Okay,
It would back up into the tile a little ways, but you gotta remember the tile is going up and away from there. So
Right.
after a little while, it's getting beyond the elevation of the creek. And I will say that, so that was January 7th of this year. And I looked, they don't have flow gauges on Prairie Creek, but I looked at flow measured on the Boone River on the same day. And it was at the 80th percentile flow roughly, which means that in time, only 20% of the time, there's a higher flow than that. Which it doesn't look super full, but it's not bone dry either. But that, I would call it elevated flow condition. But even at this condition, I would expect very little, drainage restriction on the system for this, even though it shows that there's some water sitting in that corrugated metal pipe.
I'm sure there's some sediment right there. Is it possible to dig some of that out, or do the drainage trustees have an ability to do that for so many feet or something, or what's the deal on that?
Well, the water was pretty clear on that day, and it looked actually more like there was. Probably
Sediments in the creek.
yeah, there
Yeah,
wasn't really,
sediment.
I didn't really see much, and I don't think that's gonna help us a lot, because. If we
You have
dig
to-
out
you have to go
some,
the whole way.
and then we stop somewhere,
Yeah.
and then. We're not gaining much, so it's harder to go about digging out natural creeks than it is. Drainage district open ditches, cause you have. The permitting agencies like the DNR and the Army Corps. Are more picky about that. You've got some. If you had a design and stuff, you're kind of grandfathered in with the drainage ditch, but not so with the natural creek. So. The discussion about Prairie Creek is, I mean, it is an important one, and. I think the biggest thing that I've tried to do to accommodate for that concern is to up the drainage coefficient on the system. From a 1/2 inch to 3/4 to try to compensate for that. Is that enough? That's hard to say for sure. On the yield stuff. There is a part of this report that I talked some about that, but honestly, I wish there was more research on it. But they've got some studies that showed, 10 to 15% on average yield improvements. For improvement like this, it'll vary, like Harold was saying, depending on the situation, and. This could be a negative or positive, but just putting in a new main doesn't necessarily fix everybody's problems if they don't have private tile laterals to bring it to the main.
Nope.
But, and that's another cost, but. Let's see. I guess one other thing that I would mention, I sent out letters talking about wetland determinations. That's just something for landowners. We don't want to, when we do drainage improvements, we don't want to inadvertently get you crossways with, farm program eligibility and so forth. So if you've got wetland determination, it's fine if you see them and you're like, oh, I don't have any wetlands on here according to the NRCS. I can add all the drainage I want, no problem. But especially if you do have farmed wetlands on your property, I would appreciate seeing that, knowing about that before we move forward with something. Again, we don't want to inadvertently get anybody in trouble for that. So just something to point out, something to be thinking about if we're gonna keep pursuing improvements. One thing I will ask, so if the question was raised, well, what am I recommending? And I said, as much as the landowners can stomach, essentially, if the landowners can stomach what I've got on that last page, then I think that at a minimum, the question that I would have. We'll have this upper portion of the district that does not have a drainage district tile. Can it be privately tiled? We're bringing a much better outlet way closer. But should we go a little bit further? And I think at a minimum, if you're gonna do any project, the base main improvement to 130th Street You do that, otherwise it's probably not worth messing with. And beyond that, it's kind of, I would say, as much as the landowners that are affected by those laterals can stomach. So, being that this is an informational meeting, I'd like to hear landowners' thoughts on that sort of thing. And then, being as this report's not final, I can go back and change something if I need to add something else. Before we get final recommendations to, and make a decision.
How much more approximately would it cost to take a main to 120th?
That's a good question. How much do it cost for that? Well, it'll be 207,000. Oh. Probably to be safe. Figure 150,000, but more than likely it would be less than that, because we're gonna be going down in tile side when you get up there. The other thing is that there's some uncertainty with, as far as actual drained area, when I get north of 120th Street.
Yeah.
That could, some of that could be tiled the other way, but to me, it looks like it probably would go south, but there was no county tile there. So they would have had to cross the road and go across other people's land. Most of the time I can tell, but in this case, for that particular area, it's pretty hard to know without getting some additional information. So,
Well, who knows that, which one of you would know where Terry McPeak lives here, or Bruce Wiggins, or where the McCutcheon farm was? Can you pick that up for me?
Let me see, section 8.
It's on 130th Street. And I did come over early to go upstairs to the auditor's office, but I didn't realize they closed at 4, so.
There
Missed
on 130th Street
Yeah.
there, over at the edge, that's the Sorensen farm. This one right here.
Okay,
And which one were you looking for?
well, it would be McCutcheon, Bruce Wiggins owns, it was where the conservation bought the land from the McCutcheons. So it'd be right over here somewhere, but is this Bruce Wiggins' place?
What house, old house?
No, wait, you're
It
right.
says on this, it says that is, Steven Sorensen lives there. And
Well,
then,
I'm way over here, we'd be way over here where Bruce.
well, we're in section, this is section 18 and 19. So this one and this one,
Okay,
and the cemetery is,
well, here's
This-
Terry
this-
McPeak, and here's where I am, that's what I wanted to know.
okay, yes, sir.
Okay, let me have that a minute, okay?
Yes, sir.
I need your pencil too.
Yes, okay.
I'll be right back.
I got plenty. Would you have to change any of the engineering on the lower half if you go further north?
I got a question or comment. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the project, if it's spread over like 10 or 20 years and it's paid off early, there's no penalty for it being paid off early, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I didn't know if landowners knew that or
yep.
not, so I just wanted.
What was that comment again? I'm sorry.
If it's spread, if it's over $500, then the trustees would allow it to be spread over a period of year. When they spread it, in Wright County, you're charged 6% interest being able to spread it. If you come in and pay that off early, it's done and the interest stops.
Okay,
There's no penalty for paying it off early or anything like that.
thank you.
But if the district is spread, the landowners still have to come in and sign the waiver form to say that they want to have their payment spread, otherwise it's due in full.
Okay.
And a couple other things on that subject. If 6% is the interest rate for the drainage district, and you could get a loan from somewhere else for less than 6%, then you can surely do that and then pay it off and then
Yep.
save money over time. The other thing is for drainage improvements, and I'm not a tax advisor or anything, but there's tax benefits that you could utilize potentially for projects of this nature and payments. And I had a chart in here on page 10. I was talking about economic analysis. This has hard to read, but it's basically looking at if you make different assumptions about what kind of yield increase per, percent that you would have. And then what kind of assessment you had, or you had an average one, a low assessment or a high assessment. We got all these, and you can try to roughly figure out, well, just based on increased revenue from more yield, how long would this take to pay for itself? And the assumptions here are $4 for this whole period, staying at $4 bushel corn and $11 bushel soybeans. So it's just kind of a rough thing, but for this project, you had an average assessment and you had a 10% yield increase. You're looking at about a 15-year payback. It's overly simplified, but something you can look at, think about. Any other questions, comments?
When it comes to voting on this issue, how do you parse out whether you're voting for part of the project or the whole project, meaning the extended main and lateral B?
Yeah.
Do you get to vote some of that up and some of that down, or is it all?
Yeah, I struggle with that on the engineering side. The simplest way is for me to just say, this is my recommendation, yay or nay. I kind of like to give some flexibility on some of these laterals and extensions and things. And that does make it a little bit more difficult for trying to evaluate people's thoughts on it. Because somebody might say, I don't want the project, but if it's gonna go, I want this lateral. But otherwise, I don't want any of it. So as clearly as you can state that, it'd be the most helpful. Yeah, it's a balancing act. I want to try to give as much input to landowners as I can, but it can potentially add to some confusion.
At the time of the public hearing, when this is gone over, the official public hearing, that is when the trustees will hear the input from the landowners on the different options that he'll have in his report. And at that time, hearing what the landowners would like, or not like, that is when the trustees will make the decision with the best interest of the landowners in mind.
But that's part of the reason we're having this meeting, is so that the landowners can take a look at the plan and voice, hey, we don't want this yellow line here. Let's just do the improvement to the main, out to the 24-inch. And then what does that do to the cost?
But your 1.6 million is this whole thing on the last page, is that correct?
That's correct.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes.
And it's not divvied up, the cost of this isn't divvied up on a per acre basis,
The classification will be done, and that's what he's talking about. What he started talking about was a preliminary classification. you used to go out and walk the land and determine it if you were, one of the people that was one of the commissioners on the classification. Nowadays, it's done with LiDAR, and there isn't much to do other than if a landowner says, hey, this shows this, then maybe we'll take a ride out there in the truck and take a look at the lay of the land. But typically, all of that is figured out by a computer that looks at the lay of the land and determines what the benefit is. Once we have that in hand, then it would show you, you could take $1.6 million and divide it out into the classification, and it would show you what your actual costs are gonna be.
And that classification is figured on multiple factors, not just acres.
Yep.
Your proximity to the asset, there's like 5 different,
Soil type,
yep.
slope.
I think that's covered.
Is it in there?
For? Yes, on page 11. Bullet points. Yeah,
So just to be clear again. That whole project on the back page is 1.6 million approximately, whatever that number is. And if you just go to the 42-inch main across 130th Street, that's about 1.3 million. And so then the other, if we do the on above that, that's another 300 some thousand.
Or is that
Yeah.
150?
150.
100 to 150, I'd say, thousand more.
With a lateral, it would be up to 300 between the two.
Oh, okay, I get what you're saying.
I'm saying,
Yeah,
just going to the 42-inch across the road on 130th Street is about, didn't you say it was 1.3 million?
yeah,
Okay, and so going the rest of the way is 1.66, so it's about 350,000 more. Right?
yep,
Okay. So all of the laterals above 130th Street amount to $350,000 or 360.
Yep.
Whatever that number is.
yep.
Okay, I just want to be clear. Thank you. To me, if you're gonna do the project, you ought to include the laterals because otherwise you're gonna come back in 5 years or 10 years and try to do that, and then it's gonna cost a lot more than
And you're gonna pay the engineering cost twice.
that's what I'm saying, it's gonna cost a lot more than the 350 or 360,000 at this point.
Yes.
Right.
Glad I'm not the only one.
And so that, I mean, that bringing up the preliminary classification again, like, one thing that I would like coming out of this meeting is to know if I should do that for sure. Typically we do, because if you're talking about a $1.66 million project and you know that it's $1,200 an acre, but you don't know what yours is, you wanna see that before you make a decision.
What's sad there is that you probably got 40 landowners in that district and you got, what, 3 of us here? I mean,
Yeah.
that's, how
I
many
know.
people have? Yeah, that's sad that more don't show up.
Yeah, I share the sentiment.
So do the supervisors.
Yeah,
This is a good turnout for what we typically get.
really.
Mhm.
At times it's the petitioner only,
Yeah,
We have a,
I think that was the hope of doing an evening
right?
meeting, was that we'd hopefully get more landowners here. And we've got another project in the county that we're working on as well. And the price of that project is right around the same price. It is not cheap to do work with drainage anymore.
The costs gone up pretty significantly pre-COVID versus now. They went up a lot.
Start time to finish time, what do you think?
Well. So I would anticipate from today that we would not have a a formal hearing until after planning season is over. So probably in June, something like that, and then if a decision was made to move forward, then we would put plans together to get bids and depending on how things go, it's possible that it could get done, you know, this fall, early winter. That would be the best case scenario, I guess.
If everything runs smoothly.
Yep.
And the weather
The
quality.
weather's perfect.
And that never happens.
So, yeah, that either late this fall, early winter, or, you know, potentially into early next year. I would hope that we would, you know, if we got the project to move forward, that by the time to do assessments, so the assessments would be going out in September of 27. Property taxes. Any other questions, comments, input?
And the classification as far as the cost, would that be figured before the next meeting or?
Yes. Yeah, because
But you're asking if we should do that or not. right?
Yeah.
If we should move forward to the next step,
I would highly recommend it.
I would feel.
especially because really this should be reclassified anyways.
Nope.
That won't, if the project doesn't move forward, it's really not money out the window. But I would recommend it also. It'd be hard if I was sitting in your seat to decide whether or not to support it until I would see what's it gonna cost me.
And there are some acres that you wanna pull into the district, 170 or so.
122 roughly, and that's still up for, that's not final, I guess.
Where are those acres at?
I didn't have a map, but I wrote with that, I think some of it's at the very north end there. And then there's little chunks around fringes that were not included in the original that really should be.
That are on the Boone River side or that are on
Some of both,
the west side?
some of both. So yeah, if we did,
It's not the shaded area on the offsite runoff map. That particularly was, only surface drainage, right?
well, there's still some question, I think some of that is included, yes. I don't believe that's probably a fair chunk of it. I don't think there was, that stuff north of 120th Street is currently in the drainage district. I think 120th Street's the line.
But if you annexed 175 acres up on the north end. Those people aren't really gonna be able to get to a tile. You're not running up that far.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, I see now the existing drainage district does stop at 120th Street.
yeah,
And it flat lines across there from the east boundary to the west boundary.
right.
Oh,
If you look at, the beacon map, it looks like this. It shows the existing, the northern border of the drainage district.
Yeah,
Which those lands are currently in and serviced by, it looks like Joint Drainage District 113-5/5, and lateral B1. And lateral B. Or I would assume that would be where those lands are outletting to anyway. Otherwise, they were crossing district boundaries.
Right, so. And I haven't refreshed my memory on that stuff in a little bit here. But I was looking pretty closely into the details on what was originally included in that joint 113-5 and some of that.
Yeah,
I can't remember. But to me, it looked pretty likely that some of that north of 120th Street could and maybe does drain to the south. It would make more sense to go that way, but maybe not, because there's not a county tile anywhere close.
right.
But that's where,
But it looks like that lateral B1 comes all the way through the town of, is that a town or is it? No, let's,
it's
lose that,
it's a welding shop or
okay. But it definitely comes out the south side of that, it looks like.
it does cross Highway 17 up to the east
Yeah.
side 17. Well, yeah, that is a question mark still. Is these lands north of 120th Street. Honestly, I had hope that they would be here and with tile maps and.
Yeah, without that, I mean, I would expect the reclassification to be done on the existing district boundaries.
Without tile, you mean without proving that there's tile in there that come in, or?
Well,
Without-
currently, those lands are on another classification. I mean, so I'm not gonna make them pay twice. They're already paying into 115 or 113-5. They shouldn't have to pay into 113-5 and 167. What is this one called?
162-7.
162-7, yeah.
Well, the only thing that I would say to that, I'm gonna have to think about that more, because there are some times where people tile into or out of the drainage district where the surface water goes different direction, and we already talked about that with that huge area,
Right,
but typically in the past, in most projects where I see that happening, they're still in, but they get a reduction. But this, you're
Yeah,
right, if
and-
you're already in that, and that whole parcel is in that, then it's gonna be hard if I can't prove that it's tiled this way, even though it does surface drain this way. Well, how do we differentiate between that 1,100 acres and this? And how do we say we should annex them but not them?
right.
So that gets messy.
Gets real messy, and that would need to be solved before we proceed with anything else.
Sure.
Because when you start moving lands within two different drainage districts, that definitely has to be solved before you were to do a reclassification. Otherwise, the reclassification isn't valid.
How does that happen, Dean? Is it courtroom or how?
Well,
I mean,
I don't know. I don't,
need to go, oh, this is supposed to be in that one and that's the other one?
right,
know.
I don't either. I really don't. I would be on the phone with our drainage attorney saying, yeah,
The first thing that I am planning on doing after this meeting is sending another letter to those landowners and explaining a little bit in more detail the situation there and begging them for tile maps showing where, if they have any, showing where to go, so we can get this right.
Harold, you have maps with them hooking in across? Not up there, no. Don't have any tile maps up there, period. Really? Leroy didn't say it was maps. No, and he tried to stop water from coming under that flowing, across that fence, I mean. No question about that, we talked about that. Yeah.
I'll get you, I didn't get you maps, tile maps. If I put in quite a little tile, but I'm on the very eastern edge of this district, and I border Boone River. I have some lowland that goes down and connects right up to the Boone River.
Okay,
And all my tile go to the Boone River, so. It does some of this north of me. It reaches, the slope of the land goes toward the boom favorably to run tile, and that's where they went.
okay.
I'll
Yeah,
get you
that
the
would-
maps if you want.
That would certainly help me. I speculated that that could be the case on the eastern fringe of this, but I didn't know for sure. The lay of the land would go to the west,
Well,
but that
all the
river
land,
right
all the
there.
land to the east of this road, in the middle of that square, actually goes. That's where I'm at, it goes to the east of the boom. Cause I border it, so that's where, I mean, I know that the neighbors on both sides of it do too.
That's east of that road, yeah. I figured that's what he meant.
East of Buchanan Avenue?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, really. I'll have to look if we end up chopping off that. Chop off some of this north of 120th Street, that takes off a fair number of acres. I don't know if we can look at. You know, the sizing or the design change that would lower cost some. Cause otherwise. You know, if I've got it based 1.66 million on just short of 1,400 acres, but it's actually 1,200. That's gonna increase the dollar per acre for 1,200 I would actually be paying for it.
Yep. So on the reclassification, I'm trying to get it in my head. Did you? On this map right here, the boundaries, other than north of 120th Street, are the boundaries, the existing boundaries as currently classified?
No.
Okay, we definitely need to do that. Particularly on the west side and the north side, you know, that the east side where it's what I call no man's land, where it's close to the river, it's not within the drainage district. You're talking about annexing those lands in.
Some of them potentially, and again, I don't have a perfect recollection of exactly where the annexation is. I could have brought a map. But I think part of the reason I didn't is because I had hoped that more information be provided, and I'm not saying I'm gonna annex them. And then that way it's not shown, and then take them off before people get alarmed. That was part of the thought process there. But
Well, if we're gonna change the boundaries of the existing drainage district, we need to know that first. Because I need some questions answered from the drainage attorney on how that happens. I would think that happens first before the improvement stuff can go.
so we're getting into the weeds, but I'm gonna go there.
Okay.
So this has been something that's bothered me over time, but historically, the reclassification, the annexation, if you're gonna change the boundary, happens after the improvement.
Really?
Which then you start saying, well, the people that weren't in the district that are gonna have to pay, they didn't even know about the thing, and then they're asked to pay at the end. That doesn't seem to make sense. But for
Yeah,
this,
they didn't have any voice in the decision to do the project.
and on that point, for this informational meeting, I sent out the letters,
Yep.
and I didn't just send it to the people on the existing
No,
investment schedule.
I understand.
Expanded it
Yep.
some to knowing that they could be potentially annexed. But the problem becomes when you annex somebody, you need to classify them. And so if you get into this thing where you might end up having to reclassify twice, where you reclassify once before you decide based on the existing system, and then you go and do a big improvement and reclassify again based on paying for that system. So you just did it twice. And if you kind of have it set up pretty well, maybe it's not a ton more, but you still have to go through the notices and the meetings and go through it all twice. And so it has been, there's been times where if you're gonna add a bunch, it's pretty controversial when they find out, because they're like, well, I didn't have a say and I'm not supposed to pay for this.
Exactly.
So I get where you're coming from with that. Lately, what I've been trying to do at a minimum is alert those people that could be potentially annexed, so they know what's going on. They may not like it when they're told you can object, but it actually doesn't count towards remonstrance or anything because you're not in the district right now. That's all what counts technically.
And you would have a major legal battle if that was with me, and you're saying I didn't have a choice in you spending $1.6 million, but you're saying you're gonna annex me in. Hell, I don't want in. You know, I'm already on the Boone River side. I can go straight to the river. I'm in no man's land and I pay for it myself and I'm done. I'm happy. I don't want any of this project.
And I think probably a lot of the court cases that for annexation have been over that very thing. They spend a lot of money, and when they spend a lot of money, they're typically looking at reclassification to make it fair, and oh, these lands weren't in, and then they're gonna get a big bill, and they say, I don't wanna be annexed. And if you can prove material benefit, which the courts don't completely understand what that is, maybe none of us do.
Right.
They try to fight it and they may or may not get out of that annexation. So it is a can of worms, to put it lightly.
Wait, you're looking at it annexing approximately 122 acres, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what is a possibility.
And is the majority of that to the north, that little
I believe so.
up above
I believe so.
120th Street?
I believe so.
I'm gonna put this in there just as a reminder to the trustees here. That this is an informational meeting, so there is no action or anything taken at this meeting.
Right.
Typically, whenever we have a engineer's report, which I do agree with Colin about, having a pre-classification done and the benefits of that. We haven't had that yet since I've been here. So typically our procedure that we have had is the engineer's report is filed with the recorder's office or the auditor's office, and then we have the public hearing. And then at that public hearing is where we hear from the landowners, and then the trustees take action and direct the engineer to proceed with doing a classification and such.
Agreed.
So if a classification is wanting to be done before our next meeting, that is not possible because you guys would have to take that action on it at this meeting. And this is not a meeting that you can do that at.
Correct. Yeah, I only meant that I think reclassification is important. I understand that we can't have him do that right now because this is only an informational meeting, but I want the landowners to hear from a trustee that I think that there's value
Right.
in the reclassification, so that the landowner
You guys
knows.
have seen a lot of reclassifications, the handful that we've been involved with. Those engineers in 1922, the laws of physics haven't changed much and they come up with the same thing. Are you finding that that's completely changing the classifications on these?
Well,
I mean, I know updating, it's like.
yeah, depending on,
Updated if it was right.
yeah,
It started, that's just what I'm.
A lot of the problem that we have with our classifications now is when they did that original classification, they did it as one whole lump sum. And they didn't do the individual classifications on the different laterals in that, which is now part of the code that if your reclassification is done, you need to have
Right.
those
it
separated.
was done on the total cost of the project rather than this landowner has benefit because he's using the main and he's using the lateral B, but he isn't using lateral C or D or. So that's where we typically see the changes.
Do you have a lot of participation from the landowners at that meeting?
No,
No. Typically not.
What I would recommend, if you wanna do the pre-classification, is to have a separate, and it doesn't have to be a formal hearing, but a joint board. If you can make a decision, I have an agenda item, and then take action to direct me to do pre-classification without that formal, because.
Both boards would have to do that.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's how I would recommend going about that if you wanna do the pre-classification.
But before we do that,
Yeah,
I really feel strongly about determining what the boundaries of the district are.
okay. I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna obviously send the letters, but beyond that, I'm gonna have to, and then look back at this stuff and really. You know, nail it down, and if there's still stuff where it's like. I'll have to think it through, I guess.
Okay. All right.
And so before, just, I guess, wait to hear from me on that before doing anything more.
But I think some of your, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, sir.
Bill,
Bill, it looks to me like there's some, some lands, on the east side of Buchanan Avenue that are being added in that, as you said,
goes to the boom.
there, it's currently not within a drainage district, and the closest outlet is right to the boom, and that's where you've tiled it there.
That's true, and then see, that's everything, if you go to the first gravel road. From there it goes into the district, otherwise it lays out where the road separates. An inlet where it can cross and drain that way if you get heavy rains, torrential rain. But otherwise, everything is tiled right to the boom, right to the boom.
Yeah.
It's just feasible and economical.
Yeah, so those, it would be advantageous for you if you could get him your, tile
I can
maps.
get in the maps, yeah.
Cause the reason that I had it in is cause the lay of the land looked like it would go that way, but without a tile map.
You're all up there, and it, for those that aren't familiar who we're talking, it slopes away, see, we're 30 feet on that gravel road above the Boom River. So the land slopes to the boom, I mean, it's just a natural drainage. And all surface draining will do a lot of it, but there are tile in there that help out. Cause that area, when you're looking at this map. Up there by the hog confinement, that's pretty wet up there too, and there's some real benefit if it went up that way, I would think, so those people. Might be on board. I know it's expensive per acre, but they would definitely benefit as I see it, where I've farmed up there for 35 years.
That definitely,
Yeah.
that definitely flows into this district.
Yes, you bet, and there's not a whole lot of places for it to go.
Oh,
And looks to me like that's the Walker Farms and Gerald's house.
Well, I can see where some of those people would be very happy to have that extended. Because there would be a benefit, or they could work to something, because right now I don't see any place for them to go but. To the surface, and that goes basically east or west. When you get up that far. You're too far from the river, so.
But again, if you go to this page and look, they are currently
In the other district.
in the other district
Yep.
and
Yep.
have been paying,
Yep,
into that district.
So we'll change the discussion slightly.
this after.
Sir, I was wondering about the head height, from the Prairie Creek up to 130th Street. How much fall do we have in that?
That would be. The table on page, 2. The far right hand column shows the cumulative fall. And so. The road, the 130th Street is about. In that 58.00 range, that's nearly 11 feet.
And so. Cumulative fall, oh, that's a lateral, I see it. The lateral one and the lateral spur. Those are the existing. That's the blue dot, I think, on the map. The blue line on. So, there,
The blue line is actually still the main.
okay. Then. So the main, when it crosses. 130th Street, that's about 11 foot up.
Yeah.
So the rest of the main. Goes up to 16.89 feet, and then that lateral one is. Which is the lateral one that I'm looking at there?
So it's
All the way to.
yeah, it's the one that. The main actually turns north and ends in the center of section 18,
Okay,
where the lateral one continues east, and then the spur is the little one that comes off of that.
and below the yellow line, there is. Section that swoops around and goes back to Highway 17.
Lateral.
Lateral A.
That's lateral, okay, thank you.
Yeah, the existing tile system map shows, should help you figure that out better. It labels them and the size of it.
And do the dots correspond to a station number?
No, I do not.
Okay. Just need to go by the tile diameter size to get close to the station, okay.
Or I guess there's a scale or right measures on it.
Do you see any issues? If you were putting in this new main with connecting in that lateral A? Or any of the others that connect into it?
What kind, I don't really see any issues. I don't know what kind that be.
Well, if you're changing the material to the concrete and you're going up to a 42. And that lateral A is, what, 16? Are you gonna connect that into the new main tile, or are you gonna leave that connected to the old main?
No, we would try to connect all that together.
Okay.
And at some point, would you have where you would join the old main
Yeah.
to the new main, so it acts as,
Like every so often?
Cross
Right.
connection.
Yeah.
yes, sir.
That's typically how we do that.
And we would get good GPS coordinates, so if there's a work order were to come in, we would know if it's which one it is.
Yeah.
I think that's one of Betty's big concerns when she's been here, like with our other project we talked about.
No.
Was if the current main was left and you do it parallel, how it's differentiated on which line it is when the work order comes in.
So you would not replace lateral A at all then? But you would replace the. Well,
Make a new lateral, call it lateral B.
okay, lateral one.
That's the yellow line.
Yep. Yes. And actually, so. All of that to the north, to me, looks like it actually comes into lateral A before it goes into the main. And so if we put that yellow line there, we're catching all that, so we'd actually be taking water off of lateral A. And so. Assuming it's in okay condition, we've got less acres on that, so it's gonna actually up the effective drainage coefficient on that. That was part of the thought there.
So if the current main tile down there in the southern half of section 18 turns and pretty much goes almost straight north to the center of 18, but that portion that goes almost north is not being
Nothing done to it.
nothing done to it, even though it's still part of the main.
Mhm.
Is that a reason why we're not doing that portion of it also, or?
Yeah, a lot of times I end up. Cutting stuff a little bit short because you get to a point where the old tile was an 8 inch or something, maybe you need a 10 or a 12 now, but. It's a lot more cost effective just to tile that privately. I mean, people do that all the time, and so.
And you've increased the
We
outlet
can't.
size, so.
We can, but when we get down to the point where, there's a lot of different contractors that can do that fairly easily privately, we typically stop there.
But you are putting in a 30 inch and a 24 inch
Yes.
next to that 18 inch, is that correct? And 15?
Correct.
Correct. That was it an 18 and 15 before?
It was.
Yep.
Way it looks to me it is.
Yes.
Yeah, so you would have a substantial improvement in the existing 10 inch main that goes north from there.
Yeah.
And lateral 1 and lateral 1 spur.
I know there's a bunch of tiling that's been done in that area as well. Where like a sub main has been put along some of that already on one side of it.
So basically, where you're going from here is you don't wanna do the pre-classification until you know about the annexation,
I would like to,
but he disagrees with that.
I would like to have that answered first. I'm more than willing to proceed with reclassification, but I wanna have a defined
Yeah.
boundary of what we're
And I can understand that.
doing.
I think part of my thought process was. Let's have an informational meeting and get people in here, hopefully they'll tell me
You bet.
like that,
Yep.
that's gonna be helpful, that helps me refine.
Understood.
Before we get to the point where.
Yep.
We're making final decisions and so forth.
I have another motion to make, and that we have dinner bought in, charged to the trash for.
I've got some steaks at home that I'm gonna grill, but I don't have enough for all of you. How nice is this, man? Wasn't gonna miss grilling tonight. So I think that this is our informational meeting. I think that the next meeting that we have will be, again, all of the meetings will be joint between Humboldt and Wright County. But I think the next one would be where we would, if you would prefer us to move ahead with the reclassification so that we could get that done. And then we've got true information to give to the landowners at the formal hearing on whether we proceed with this project or not.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
Well, the only question I have there, you said reclassification, you mean pre-class?
Pre-classification, I'm sorry, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So I'll try to get to the bottom of all of this and come back to you, and then, once we have that sorted out, the thought, I'm gonna recommend that we do the pre-classification.
And that we can have just a joint meeting without the landowners there. You can get a hold of Courtney to let us know.
Yep.
When we can have this joint meeting between the counties.
And they could be here.
Oh, yeah, they can be here, but
Can't be here. That way you would know if there's been some changes to the boundaries. Yeah. The landowners are always welcome at all of these meetings.
So do you kind of have a time frame that you're looking at to kind of hopefully give these landowners on the north end a deadline to say, hey, can you please get these to me in the next 30 days or something? Just so that we kind of have an idea on a time frame.
Timetable.
I will put that in the letter, and if anybody in the meantime knows anybody that I could call, or, cause all I can do at this point is send a letter. And I hasn't produced anything yet from these, but, so if anybody knows any other way to get a hold of these folks, I'd sure appreciate it. If we can't get anything from them, maybe I can get a hold of them and they say, I don't have any tile maps, I don't know.
Right.
Then I'll have to come up with something, I'll have to decide what to do, but.
And if you give me a heads up on that, then I can say, hey, we've got an engineering report that we have not accepted yet, but it shows that we are going into another drainage district. Which comes first, the annexation or the hearing on the improvement? Because I definitely would want his opinion on that.
Yeah.
If the boundaries remain the same, then it's easy.
And it all just comes down to a matter of, even if it's potentially directing the engineer to begin the process of the pre-classification, just so that we can have that verbiage on the agenda.
Yep.
As such, and if it's not ready to go yet, we don't have all the information, or it's coming and we need to delay it a little bit, we can always table that to an undetermined time, or if we know a time frame, we can always do that. It's just a matter of having that verbiage on the agenda, if it's a possibility that it could be taken action on at that time.
Yeah.
So. All right.
Good.
Ashley, do you have any other questions?
I don't think so. I'm
I
off.
did grab his handouts and put them on your desk for you, so you have a copy.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah,
You're
I'm
welcome.
also new to drainage, so I'm just trying to understand all of it, listen, and try to take in and learn.
Is there any other comments, questions from the landowners? No?
Thanks, everyone.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Okay,
Rick, you wanna close out? Adjourn. I have it.
Oh, motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I made a motion to adjourn.
Oh, sorry.
I second it.
Second.
Humboldt second.
All right.
All in favor?
Aye.
All ayes.
All eyes for Humboldt?
Yes.
Have a good evening, Ashley.
Yep, see you guys later.